The story of the sheriff and the black woman, a case of racism in the courtroom. Hello everyone. In the history of the United States, there have been numerous incidents where racism has been both blatant and systemic. One such incident occurred within the walls of a courtroom, a place traditionally thought to represent justice and fairness. The story of the sheriff and the black woman is one that highlights not only racial prejudice, but also how institutions like the court system can perpetuate such discrimination. This event centers around a black woman who found herself the subject of ridicule and disrespect at the hands of a judge who exhibited clear racial biases that had long been hidden beneath the surface. This case sparked outrage, protests, and calls for justice, eventually leading to a formal investigation into the behavior of the judge in question. The story begins in a small town in America, in a courthouse that should have been a place for all citizens, regardless of race, to receive equal treatment. The black woman at the heart of this story, let's call her Clara, had been involved in a legal dispute that had brought her before the judge. She was facing charges that, while serious, were ultimately linked to a situation that many in her community could relate to. Clara was accused of a minor crime, but the nature of the case was not the focus of the public outcry that followed. Instead, it was the behavior of the judge, who was supposed to embody fairness and justice, that became the center of attention. Clara entered the courtroom, where she was greeted by the sheriff, a law enforcement officer who was tasked with maintaining order during the proceedings. She was dressed in the same way that many defendants find themselves nervous, vulnerable, and under the scrutiny of the law. The sheriff, tasked with overseeing security, initially did nothing to raise alarm. But as the court proceedings began, the atmosphere quickly shifted. As Clara stood before the judge, she was subjected to a series of belittling comments and an overall dismissive attitude. The judge, a middle-aged white man, began by mocking Clara's accent, making remarks that suggested he felt superior due to his race and position. His comments were thinly veiled as humor, but to anyone watching, they were unmistakably cruel. At one point, the judge laughed openly at Clara when she explained her side of the case, smirking as if the very idea of a black woman standing before him was amusing. His laughter echoed through the courtroom, and it was evident to all who were present that the judge saw no need for respect, decency, or professionalism. For Clara, this moment was more than just a personal affront. It was a glaring example of how the justice system, despite its promise of equality, was still deeply flawed and prejudiced. The sheriff, who was present in the courtroom, did nothing to intervene. Instead, he stood by and watched as the judge ridiculed Clara, contributing to the humiliation. This lack of action from law enforcement further illustrated the systemic issues that have long plagued the court system, issues that allowed such behavior to go unchecked. News of the judge's behavior quickly spread throughout the town and beyond, sparking outrage among Clara's community and those who heard about the incident. People were furious that a judge, someone who was supposed to uphold the law and treat every individual with respect, had instead chosen to mock and belittle a black woman in front of the entire courtroom. The case was widely seen as an example of how deeply entrenched racism continued to influence the justice system. Protests erupted outside the courthouse, with people of all races coming together to demand accountability for the judge's actions. Demonstrators held signs reading "Justice for Clara" and "End racism in our courts," while others called for the sheriff to be held accountable for not intervening when the judge crossed the line. Clara's case, though initially a minor legal matter, had now become a symbol of the larger battle for racial equality in America. The incident struck a nerve with many who had long suspected that the legal system was not as impartial as it was meant to be. Clara's treatment was just one example of how black individuals, especially black women, face double discrimination, first for their race and second for their gender. In response to the growing public outcry, an investigation was launched into the behavior of the judge. The investigation was led by a team of independent legal experts who were tasked with examining whether the judge's actions violated ethical standards or laws regarding discrimination. The investigation revealed that the judge had a history of making racially insensitive remarks and treating people of color with contempt. Several former defendants and court employees came forward with stories of similar mistreatment. Corroborating the claims made by Clara, witnesses testified that the judge had regularly displayed a dismissive attitude toward black defendants, making racially charged jokes and acting in ways that could only be described as prejudiced. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the judge initially denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that his behavior had been misinterpreted and that he had only been trying to lighten the mood in what he believed to be a tense courtroom environment. However, the testimonies from multiple witnesses, including members of the court staff, made it clear that the judge's actions were part of a larger pattern of discriminatory behavior. As the investigation continued, it became evident that the problem was not isolated to one judge, but was symptomatic of a broader issue within the judicial system. Many legal professionals began to question whether the court system could ever truly be impartial, when judges, who were supposed to be unbiased, could so easily let their racial prejudices influence their actions. The case of Clara versus the judge was a pivotal moment in the ongoing conversation about race in America, particularly within the context of the legal system. It raised critical questions about how judges, law enforcement, and other members of the justice system interact with black individuals, and how they treat people of color who are often subjected to bias and prejudice. For many black Americans, the case was a stark reminder that racism is not only present in overt acts of violence, but also in the institutions that are meant to serve and protect everyone. The courtroom, a place that should have offered justice, instead became a stage for a public display of racial discrimination. This incident led to calls for reform within the justice system, with many activists and community leaders demanding more thorough background checks for judges and stricter accountability measures. Additionally, there was an outcry for better training for law enforcement officers and court staff to help them understand and combat implicit biases. After the investigation, the judge in question was ultimately removed from the bench, though some felt that this action was too little, too late. Clara, though vindicated in some ways, still felt the sting of the mistreatment she had endured. She had become a symbol of the fight against racism in the justice system, but it had come at a personal cost. In the aftermath, Clara was supported by her community, and she became an outspoken advocate for justice reform. She spoke out about her experience at rallies and in interviews, sharing her story as a way to shine a light on the racism that still permeated the courtroom. The sheriff, too, faced public scrutiny for his lack of action during the trial. His failure to intervene in the judge's behavior was seen by many as an endorsement of the racist attitudes displayed in the courtroom. In the end, his inaction was part of a larger pattern of indifference that allowed racial discrimination to flourish within the justice system. While the case of Clara and the judge became a landmark moment in the fight for racial equality, it also highlighted how much work remained to be done to ensure that the justice system would truly be just for all. The incident underscored the importance of holding individuals accountable for their actions, whether they are in positions of power or not, and it called for continued vigilance in the fight against racism in all its forms. The story of the sheriff and the black woman is one of many examples of racial discrimination within the American justice system, but it stands out because it reveals the often overlooked role that judges and law enforcement play in perpetuating these inequities. Clara's case serves as a powerful reminder that the fight for racial justice is not just about addressing overt acts of racism, but also about challenging the systemic biases that influence the decisions made by those in power. As America continues to grapple with issues of race and justice, the story of Clara and the judge serves as both a cautionary tale and a call to action. It reminds us that while progress has been made, much work remains to be done to ensure that everyone, regardless of their race, is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve in the eyes of the law. Judge laughs at black woman in court, then freezes when she flashes her USS badge. The courtroom was filled with tension. The judge, a man who thought he had control over the room, sat back in his chair, his arrogance almost palpable. He sneered at the calm black woman standing before him, dismissing her as just another defendant's family member, someone to be ignored. But he didn't know what she was about to reveal. No one did. As he laughed at her, the woman's composure remained unshaken. She had something powerful, something that would change the entire course of the trial. What happened next would shake the room to its core. Let me take you back to that pivotal moment. The scene opens with Angela Monroe, a composed woman standing before a biased judge. The atmosphere in the courtroom is thick with tension. The judge, a man nearing the end of his career, exudes an air of superiority. He's made up his mind about Angela, even before hearing her side. His condescension is clear as he dismisses her without truly understanding who she is. But Angela, a seasoned professional who has seen much worse, remains unbothered. Her brother, Marcus, sits beside her, wrongly accused of resisting arrest. Despite video evidence showing the truth, he's emotionally drained, his confidence shaken by the relentless accusations. Angela reassures him, quietly reminding him to hold onto hope. The trial isn't over, and Angela, she's far from done. As the trial continues, Judge Bernard Whitman grows increasingly dismissive of Angela's presence in the courtroom. He's used to people cowering under his gaze, and he expects Angela to do the same. But what he doesn't know is that Angela is not just any woman, she's a skilled professional, with years of experience in high-pressure situations, and she's about to show the court exactly why she's here. The prosecutor, Daniel Reed, rises with all the theatrics of a man who believes victory is already his. His words are full of exaggerated accusations and half-truths, casting Marcus as a threat to society. Angela clenches her fists but remains silent. The time for speaking the truth is not yet. She knows the right moment will come. Angela is called to testify. The judge's eyes gleam with disbelief as he mocks her testimony, questioning her qualifications to speak on law enforcement. "Do you think you know more than me?" he sneers. Angela stands her ground, speaking clearly, her words filled with conviction. Yet every time she tries to explain the facts, Judge Whitman cuts her off, showing his disdain for her presence. But Angela's calm doesn't break. She's been in far worse situations, and this courtroom is nothing compared to the battles she's faced. Still, she feels the weight of the moment. The world is watching, and her brother's future rests on the lies of others. Angela refuses to let this injustice continue. As the trial proceeds, the tension builds. Angela's patience, honed over years of service, is the one advantage Judge Whitman never anticipated. She's not here to follow the script. She's here to expose the truth. The prosecutor attempts to reinforce the narrative that Marcus resisted arrest, but Angela knows better. She's seen the video. She's heard the testimonies. She knows the system is flawed, but she also knows how to work within it. At a critical moment, the judge once again mocks her, questioning her experience and dismissing her as just another activist. But this is no ordinary woman. Angela holds back a growing anger as she watches the judge try to assert control. The system has always been biased against people like Marcus, and the judge is a living example of that bias. But Angela doesn't need to explain herself further. She knows exactly what to do. The turning point comes when Angela finally reveals her true identity. She reaches into her blazer and pulls out a small black wallet, flipping it open to reveal a USSS badge. "My name is Special Agent Angela Monroe, United States Secret Service." The room falls into stunned silence. The prosecutor, who had been so confident just moments ago, now sits frozen. The defense attorney looks on in disbelief, but it's the judge's reaction that is most telling. For the first time in the entire trial, Judge Whitman is speechless. The smug smile that had once curled his lips disappears. His entire demeanor shifts as he realizes that Angela is not someone he can dismiss so easily. The room is electric, and Angela has just leveled the playing field. Angela doesn't stop there. She continues, her voice steady but unyielding. "I've spent the last 10 years serving this country, protecting its leaders and upholding its laws, and I will not stand by while this courtroom distorts justice to fit a narrative of prejudice and power." She speaks not just to the judge, but to the jury, the prosecutor, and the gallery. Her words carry weight, and the truth is undeniable. Her courage shines through as she stands up for her brother, refusing to let the injustice continue. The prosecutor, Daniel Reed, and the judge have nothing left to say. Angela has made her point, and the court is forced to listen. It's no longer about the evidence alone. It's about the courage to stand up and demand fairness, no matter the cost. The tension in the courtroom is palpable as the jury deliberates. Will they listen to the truth, or will they succumb to the pressures of a biased system? The hours pass slowly, but Angela remains composed, her resolve unwavering. She knows that this case is about more than just her brother. It's about ensuring that the truth is heard, no matter how uncomfortable it may be for those in power. Finally, the jury returns with their verdict, not guilty. The courtroom erupts in a mix of gasps, murmurs, and disbelief. Marcus, once a man shackled by false accusations, is free. Angela, the quiet force behind his freedom, stands beside him, her composure unbroken. As the courtroom empties, Angela and Marcus walk out together, the weight of the trial finally lifting from their shoulders. The battle is far from over, but for now, they have won. Angela's victory is not just about justice for her brother, it's about fighting for what's right, for standing up against a system that perpetuates bias, and for ensuring that truth always prevails. In the weeks that follow, Angela becomes an advocate for justice, speaking at community forums, meeting with legal reform organizations, and lending her voice to those who have been wronged by the system. Her fight continues, but now, with the weight of the truth on her side, she knows that change is possible. The story of Angela Monroe teaches us that true justice is not just about following the law. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the system is stacked against us. It's about having the courage to challenge those in power, no matter how daunting the task may seem. And above all, it's about remembering that the truth, no matter how much it is buried or ignored, always finds a way to rise to the surface. For Angela, this case was just the beginning. And for all of us, it's a reminder that in the face of injustice, we must never back down. We must speak the truth, demand fairness, and continue the fight for equality. Because when we stand together, change is not only possible, it's inevitable.